sretna pod suncem, rasti u jaslama dječjim, rasti i cvijetaj zemljo radnih ljudi, i neka mir nad tvojim ljudima vlada, mir tvojim lađama napuči i tvome danu što se vedar budi. Rasti sretna da svi narodi vide, sa strana svih, sa juga i sjevera, kako se rađa i kako se voli, kako se brani zemlja proletera. Rasti cvjetaj pod zvijezdom slobode, pod rukom partije i pod srcem Tita. Rasti cvjetaj pod zvijezdom slobode, pod rukom partije i pod srcem Tita. Nad tvojim ljudima vlada, mir tvom rudaru i tvome rataru, mir graditelju i tvom čuvaru, mir tvojoj sreći u vodi i u zraku, u pjesmi strojeva самых окраин, южный гор до северных морей. Человек проходит, как хозяин необъятной родины своей. Тут жизнь невольна и широка, точно Волга полная течет. Молодым везде у нас дорога, старикам везде у нас почет. Никто у нас не лишний, по заслугам каждый награжден. Золотыми буквами мы пишем всенародный сталинский закон. Этих слов величие и славу никакие годы не затрут. Человек всегда имеет право на учение, подвиг и на труд. Наша нам не родная, много лет. день ветер веет, с каждым днем все радостнее жить. И никто на свете не умеет лучше нас смеяться и любить. Но сурово брови мы насупим, если враг захочет нас сломать. Как небесную родину мы любим, бережем, как ласковую мать. ce știm noi din vremuri strămoșești, cuvânt de dor și luptă, de doine și povești. Dar dacă astăzi pacea e lege și sfut, e pentru că pe lume partidul s-a născut. Cuvinte le-am moștenit în grai, doar bănuiam ce înseamnă, ce tâlcuri au sub strai. Dar dacă astăzi tâlcul de plin l-am priceput, e pentru că pe lume partidul s-a născut.
Răsună evening, everybody, and welcome to this most solemn occasion. The occasion being, of course, the annual fit of bread and circuses, though in the case of the economically diminished United States these days, perhaps less bread and more circuses. That is the United States presidential election. And here we are. It has been a long road. I feel like I've really grown up with the Biden administration in a certain sense, given that this show you're watching now, this particular version of it is, of course, just over a year old, 14 months or so now. But the podcast that grew this grew from the old Red Star Radio podcast, that really began with an interview I did with my my former podcasting partner Layla on January the 6th, 2021. So that's over 3 years ago, almost 4 years ago now. And that was the first interview that I'd done on what had been a spasmodic podcast before then. And we spoke to each other on January the 6th, on the evening of January the 6th, after the extended liberal meltdown, which I still maintain was one of the funniest events I've ever seen. Amateur hour bullshit, you know. That was where the genesis of the program you're watching actually came about. The infamous event which the liberals in the United States still keep trying to convince everybody was like the moment that American so-called democracy were teetered on the verge of collapse, only to be saved by such brave and heroic crusaders as Liz fucking Cheney. And, the day that AOC was almost murdered by sitting in an office. If nothing else, the Trump era gave us that massive comedic moment, which revealed the politicians in charge, well, not in charge, but the politicians who pretend to be in charge of American imperialism to be the worst collection of corrupt, feeble, and sniveling cowards this side of, well, the Palace of Westminster, in actual fact. So I feel an association with the Biden era, and it is coming, of course, to a close. And naturally, this show continues to evolve, whereas Joe will, of course, be shut in a retirement home for disgraced paedophile politicians and not allowed to give many interviews. And of course, we must turn now to the candidates in question. Let us examine, of course, Kamala Harris, former senator for about 5 minutes, former ruthless, rabidly authoritarian Attorney General of California, prominent advocate of prison slave labor, particularly for putting out forest fires, prominent advocate of keeping men who have been cleared by the courts of any wrongdoing in prison, a prominent advocate of what some US academics refer to as the prison industrial complex, that Kamala Harris. And up against her, of course, a woman who, lest it be forgotten, managed to obtain the Democratic Party nomination on the basis of 0 votes, on the basis that she was installed after the Democratic Party hierarchy suddenly realized after 4 years that Biden might not be all there, after he got caught out by Trump in that hilarious first debate, which you can find back on the archives of the channel. And she was installed having been voted for by nobody. And again, lest we forget, Biden was renominated in a transparently rigged process because they knew damn well he was losing his mind. So they rigged the process for him, thought they got away with it. Trump battered him in the first debate, so they panicked and they installed somebody else. There you go. As the Democrats themselves observed just after the first Bernie Sanders farrago all the way back in 2016, they're a private company and they don't owe you shit. So in terms of democracy, in terms of transparent processes, they can do whatever the fuck they like. They can rig their primaries. They can install dementia patients as their nominee. They can install a giggling, buffoonish drunk who is wholly unqualified to do anything other than lounge at a cocktail club at 10 in the morning, sozzled to the point of no return, and babble away about how her former husbands are all terrible. It's basically like a sort of slightly less white version of Lucille Bluth from Arrested Development, but nowhere near as funny. That's your Democratic Party nominee. Now, up against her, of course, is a man who is a master of hype. We have to give this to him. We have to give the man his due, which is that Donald Trump has proven himself to be, over many, many years, decades, in fact, a master of hype over reality when it comes to his real estate career, when it comes to his foray into casino management, where he managed to go bankrupt, when it comes to Trump University, when it comes to Trump stakes and various other things that he's engaged in, Trump Airlines, Trump mortgages, lest we forget that. He is a master of presenting a record of total, utter, disastrous failure as one of glittering success. And in that sense, he is the ideal man for the job, the ideal man for the job of president. Because who better to come out and polish the never-ending supply of turds coming out of the White House and being served up to the American worker than a man who's been polishing turds for his entire career, and not just on the Howard Stern show either. So in many ways, an ideal man for the position. But let us examine, of course, the record of a certain Donald John Trump, from, mafia-tied real estate operator to the man who was mentored by Roy Cohn, who was, again, if we need to remind ourselves, a mob lawyer and a scumbag of epic proportions. And no, I haven't seen the film with Jeremy Strong as Roy Cohn and Sebastian Stan as the young Donald Trump. The reviews tell me it's a lib wank fest, so I haven't bothered with it. If you have alternative views, do express them in the chat. And if you think I should watch it and review it, do express those views in the chat as well. So Donald John Trump, his political career, in actual fact, began a lot longer ago than you might imagine. Trump was a long-time New York City Democrat, as was his father, I believe. And again, this doesn't come from any particular deep-rooted belief. This is just the fact that the Democrats have run New York City politics for an awfully long time. And if you wanted to get anything done in the building trade, well, you'd better know the right people in politics. And so aligning with the Democrats makes sense. There have, of course, been Republican mayors, many Republican mayors of New York City. But in terms of the actual local politics of New York, it's been solidly Democratic for, I think, most of this century and the last century as well. So Trump's been a Democrat before, as was thrown at him in the 2016 primary. Trump's also, if we remember back to the early 2000s, I think, was flirting with a run for the Reform Party. I think it was Ross Perot's old vehicle in the 2000 election, I think it was. And of course, then he danced all the way up to running against Mitt Romney for the Republican nomination in 2012, and then sort of Romney genuflected to him, so he danced away from it again. Then he got involved in 2016, principally, I think, to boost the next season of The Apprentice. And then, of course, his appeal took off. And we have covered the reasons why before. But I think to go back to the idea of Donald Trump as a hype man, Donald Trump's career as a politician is really an example of just hype man stuff. And it's that's done the hype from him and the hype from his enemies as well. In many ways, his political career is an exact continuation of his business career, given that what he says he did and what he actually did are two wildly different things. that have little in common with each other. Now, Trump, if you remember back in 2016, said all kinds of wild and contradictory things on the campaign trail. He successfully, and again, I don't blame anybody for enjoying the demolition of the loathsome, odious, criminal Hillary Clinton. Her losing the presidency to Donald Trump in 2016 was a profoundly hilarious event and will always remain so, as was, by the way, Trump's demolition of Jeb Bush, who looked like he was going to cry, and his mockery of Marco Rubio and Ted Cruz. All of that very, very funny. You could see the appeal of Trump as basically a guy stood there throwing shit at all these self-important tossers in 2016. Again, you could see the appeal of that. However, even in 2016, even at the moment of his defining triumph, and what I suspect, barring my predictions going very wrong, and we'll come to those later, what I suspect will be his crowning moment and his highest moment in politics, which is the win in 2016. It must be said that Trump did not, of course, secure some kind of landslide. This was no like Reagan victory in 1984, or even Reagan in 1980, or even George H.W. Bush in 1988. This was a win that was squeaked out via the strange electoral college system put in there. We must, of course, recall that this was a system that is put in there specifically to stop any candidate who would be truly dangerous for the American bourgeois getting through. So the fact that Trump got through it in 2016 should show you that he was never that truly dangerous to the American bourgeois. Now, why I say that Trump's highest moment is 2016, and he will most likely never top that, and also that, again, his popularity and his dangerous nature have always been wildly overstated. In 2016, he got around about the same amount of votes as Mitt Romney did in 2012. It's just that things fell slightly better for him because Hillary Clinton got less votes in certain key states. Again, hilarious stuff. The fact that he won so narrowly makes it even funnier. But he needs to be. We need to separate out what is real in the Trump phenomenon and what isn't. What was not real in 2016, or really since then, even though Trump has somewhat attracted some new people into voting for him, he has not managed to address what I would argue is a long-term decline in the Republican Party voting base. If you look at Republican Party electoral victories since Reagan in 1980, they have been suffering from diminishing returns at a presidential level for a long time. So like Reagan got the big blowout against Mondale in 84. H.W. Bush easily beat Dukakis in 88. After that, though, it becomes really ever closer with, George W. Bush getting in by basically his brother and his father using their various connections to rig it for him. He was installed, he wasn't elected. There's an argument to say the same thing happened in 2004. The Republican base, whilst it has some hardcore elements to it, just as the Democratic Party has a hardcore element to it, the Republican base on a national level has been unable to win a clear majority in the presidential elections for if we take the 2004 result as being legitimate, for 20 years. Now that's a problem when you're running at a national level. Even if we believe Trump's case that the 2020 election was rigged. Now, I think that all bourgeois democracy is a scam, so let's get that out of the way first of all. But were any of Trump's claims legitimate? Well, there were certainly people messing around with that election. There's no doubt about that. There were manipulations going on. But as I've already said, there's at least a few other elections in my lifetime where there's obvious manipulations gone on by both parties of the American oligarchy, Democrat and Republican. So Trump's claims are hardly unique. And electorally, the US voting systems, because there's many depending upon the state, are they are a joke. They are a joke. The electronic voting systems are not secure. They can be hacked very easily. So there may have been people screwing around with the vote totals in 2020. Trump never managed to prove it, though, because, again, and this goes to Trump's fundamental weakness, Trump surrounds himself with fucking clowns and con men and ass kissers and grovelers and completely incompetent idiots who aren't even able to serve Trump's own stated agenda. And he did that with the vote rigging claims and therefore got absolutely nowhere with it. That's part of the reason why he didn't have capable people running these lawsuits. He had people like that drunk Rudy Giuliani and that con artist Sidney Powell, I think her name was. So it is another case where Trump might have had some points he could have made, but due to the way he pursued it, completely fucked it up. And that is the whole Trump presidency in a nutshell. Trump comes in, again, saying a variety of contradictory things, saying, we're gonna just deregulate everything. But, I'm going to bring back Glass-Steagall at the same time. We're going to do away with Obamacare. And we're going to get everybody covered. We're going to have total healthcare coverage. I remember all this from 2016. Like, he would literally contradict himself inside, like, a paragraph often. Like, the long speeches, which, credit where credit is due. He still does those same long speeches now. His closing speech was an hour and a half long. So, whatever else you think of the man, he's certainly still got the stamina. But he would completely and wildly contradict himself all the way through, like, 2016. And again, like all bourgeois elections, you are, as a voter, encouraged to not vote on the candidate's record, but to do one of two things. Either vote against the other candidate because you hate them more, or vote for an imagined version of what your candidate is, not the real version. And that's what people, of course, were doing with Hillary Clinton. They were voting for the imaginary version of Hillary Clinton, not the real horrific war criminal scumbag version. And people were voting for a fantasy version of Donald Trump. Now, admittedly, Donald Trump said enough things in 2016 to lead people to believe that he was some sort of radical opponent of the system, and a variety of people attached themselves to that campaign, as they have this time around, trying to prove that he's some sort of insurgent, anti-establishment, populist, conservative outsider. He's nothing of the kind. That is all spin. That is all marketing. Trump, again, to sing the man's praises to this extent, has been very good at marketing himself as the enemy of the established power structures in Washington, D.C. The reality of his presidency is, of course, completely different. The reality of Donald Trump's presidency shows a man who is as dedicated a servant to the American ruling class as Joe Biden is, as Barack Obama was. A man whose opposition to the so-called deep state is absolutely skin deep. He surrounded himself with security state, long-term security state employees, people like John Bolton, people like Mike Pompeo, people like General John Kelly, people like H.R. McMaster. He also surrounded himself with arms industry lobbyists, like one of his defense secretaries, Mark Esper, oil industry lobbyists like Rex Tillerson. So these are all characters straight from the benches of the ruling class itself, or at least their employees. This isn't like somebody who employed like populist conservative types. This isn't the truly, shall we say, the truly libertarian characters in the Republican Party who might have been his allies when it comes to battling the various federal police agencies. Like, these are people he's largely marginalized or sidelined. So, like, for all you can criticize the man, and there's a lot to criticize, someone like Rand Paul, who declared for Trump in 2016 and 2020, but has been marginalized this time round, or Representative Thomas Massie, again, a man who I would agree I'd agree with him on almost nothing, but Trump has allowed the Republican Party to, of course, marginalize him because he, of course, has criticized Israel. So here is the reality of Trump. Trump, in his record in office, what are the notable things that he actually achieved? Let's just talk purely domestically. The giant tax cut for the rich, of course, he did that. He brought back quantitative easing. I mean, he did that in 2019. Let's remember that. He oversaw the disastrous lockdown measures. Again, he has tried to dance away from that, but a lot of that came from his decisions. Now, yes, a lot of that was left up to the states. A lot of that was individual governors doing it, but Trump was the guy who started the process off. And never, again, Trump is in typical Trump style. Like, Trump oversaw Operation Warp Speed. I mean, fuck's sake, why do they come up with these stupid titles for these like these projects, which is just about transferring money, which was a giant transference of cash to the pharmaceutical industries to deliver a product which is at best substandard, at worst, and for certain people, dangerous. That was Trump. Trump did that. Trump tried to dance away from his wholehearted backing, or his team's wholehearted backing, for, of course, the notorious Dr. Fauci, who is a lifetime state bureaucrat and who has overseen all kinds of heinous things, including, the infamous experiment with flesh-eating insects eating the heads of dogs. Was notorious for his mishandling of the AIDS crisis in the 1980s, and he's only really good at securing more federal funding for himself. And again, Fauci was 100% backed up by Trump's team. So Trump's allies and Trump's boosters in alternative media saying, oh, Trump didn't like this or Trump didn't like that. Trump stood next to Fauci at half a dozen press conferences and never spoke out against him, never got rid of him, never fired him. Despite the fact that some of Trump's supporters sincerely wanted to do that, he never got rid of him. He never got rid of Redfield, never got rid of Birx, because, again, Trump wasn't running his administration. Trump's administration was largely in the hands of other people, partly Mike Pence, who's as absolutely bog standard a Republican as you can possibly find, partly Jared Kushner, this odious, slimy little turd who looks like a reject from the Habsburg dynasty, who, according to the book by Scott Atlas, who was brought in to advise on the COVID measures, was like Jared Kushner was the one who was like the gatekeeper to Trump. So like Trump says all these things and people get invested in them, but Trump obviously doesn't run his administration. He didn't run the first administration either. Kushner did, Pence did, John Kelly did to a certain extent. Tillerson had some influence, but not very much. And of course, the other one being Mike Pompeo, former CIA director under Trump, and of course, Secretary of State under Trump. So Pompeo is, of course, one of the most ruthless and sadistic bastards in US politics, and that takes some real doing. He's the man who organized a plan to assassinate Julian Assange. And this was Trump's CIA director, maybe the ideal man for that job, and then Secretary of State. And he may well be in for a big job again. Trump's been on the campaign trail with him this week. And so with that in mind, I'm going to just show you a clip that Michael Tracy picked up on from Trump's campaign stops this week, where he was out with the notorious Mike Pompeo. So if you'll indulge me for a moment, I'm going to do a quick screen share here. So here's Pompeo, who, if you're looking at him now, he looks like the lead character from the Stephen King story Finner these days. I don't know if he's crossed a gypsy recently, but he certainly looks as if he has.
Often get asked, Mike, what was it like? Right, the Washington Post described me as the most loyal cabinet member to Donald J. Trump. I had to remind the president that they did not mean that as a compliment. They asked me, what was it like to serve for President Trump? And I told them, and I've told everyone hundreds of times in these 3.5 years, it was the greatest privilege that Mike Pompeo could ever have. I was proud to be a part of President Trump's team. I talked to him every day for 4 years, first as CIA director and then as Secretary of State. And what I was so proud of is that we understood the greatness of this nation, and we never once apologized for the United States of America. Not once. Now, President Trump's going to secure our southern border. We will bring peace back to the world. We will take down the Ring of Fire. We will support our friends in Israel, but he's going to need help to do that.
Right, so there you go. If you weren't exactly clear on where Donald Trump stands, the former CIA director and a victim of Ozempic, it seems, hat tip to Jenny in the chat for that one, has confirmed it. Really, it's this is the priority. And by the way, the Ring of Fire he refers to is Iran. He's going to take down Iran. Now, I have outlined at great length why I do not think that that is possible for the US imperialists to do without sustaining irretrievable losses themselves. But that was the guy who spent 4 years, as he said, and he's not lying now, talking to Trump every day. One of the reasons why Pompeo didn't run this time was, one, he's smart enough to realize he couldn't beat Trump. Two, he also knows he can get a job out of Trump, and he will. I am sure he will, because he's been groveling to Trump, and the one thing that Trump always goes for is a groveler, which means he's a very, very poor politician, a very, very, very poor leader, because you don't want a cabinet of grovelers, because they're likely stabbing you in the back, and they will likely mislead you at every single turn, as Trump was misled and bamboozled every single time that he tried to do something that he probably did sincerely want to do when he was president. So let's take some foreign policy examples. Let's talk about Syria. I've seen people on other channels, shall we say, trying to make excuses for Trump's Syria policy. Now, Trump said, we got to get out of Syria. What are we doing there? It's crazy, folks. Okay, he did say that. What did he do when he got in? All the way back in 2017. Well, I remember very well because it must have been 2 to 3 months, maybe April 2017. I was walking back from work, and I switched on the radio, and I heard that the US was, and the British, of course, tagging along as always, were throwing cruise missiles into Syria again, because Trump had been shown some evidence that Assad was doing evil things. And did he ask any questions? Did he do anything to try and stop this? No. He went along with it. Twice, in fact. Bombed Syria twice, at least. And that was just two. And if you remember Brian Williams, remember him? Looking like he was in some sort of fit of orgasmic delight, saying, "This truly is the moment that Donald Trump became president. I marvel in the beauty of our weapons," to quote Leonard Cohen. Sorry, "I am blinded by the beauty of our weapons." Brian was, of course, blinded by his own ego, of course, and paid a certain price for that. But this was suddenly, in April of 2017, you suddenly got all the Washington Post and New York Times creeps declaring that Trump was becoming president now, because he was going along with their agenda, as he did consistently, by the way, when it came to Syria. He didn't withdraw the troops. He could have done. Had he been prepared to, or been capable of waging a bureaucratic battle with the Pentagon heads and the people in his own party, he as president has the power to order those troops to be withdrawn. He never did that. He talked about it, and with Trump's tiny brain, he thinks that if he talks about it, he's done it. And that's as good as doing it. Because again, this is what he's good at. He's good at spinning things, coming up with the story, glad-handing, bullshitting. He's not good at serious work, nor does he hire people who are prepared to do serious work, especially if it involves oppositional work. Trump, it's all talk, literally just all talk. And for some people, who again will remain nameless, to claim that this was somehow a better time when Trump was bombing Syria repeatedly and going along with virtually every demand that the anti-Assad group in Washington, D.C. had, then I really don't know what those people are smoking. I really don't. Because that is like one of the stupidest fucking statements I could possibly imagine making. Again, to fall for the fact that Trump talked about withdrawing and never did a single damn thing to do it. And then in the end says, we're staying there to take the oil. So literally gangster shit, you know? And again, like the libs didn't like that. They had a meltdown over the fact that Trump basically blurted out some element of the truth. Now, you look at other areas of policy, like Trump agreed to the assassination of General Soleimani, for instance. Why? Because he was told it would be a great idea and he'd look heroic. Then he suddenly realized when he'd done it that, oh shit, this might lead to consequences. So again, certain people have been trying to excuse Trump's assassination of Soleimani, an act of state terrorism, which I don't think, if we're going to be honest here, I don't even think that somebody like Obama would have done that. I don't even think that someone like W. Bush would have done that. Trump did it because Trump, again, got approached by, well, I'm assuming John Bolton, or it could have been Pompeo, probably both of them, say, listen, Mr. President, if you do this, you'll look like a real fucking hero. And of course he did it, then shit himself, realizing that Iran could hit back. But again, it's an act of thuggish state terrorism, which some people really want to excuse. Why? Because they like it when Trump says things that they periodically agree with. But again, what Trump says and what Trump did, two completely different things. So when you look at Trump, what is this great heterodox populist president actually achieved? Tax cut for the wealthy, staying in Syria, not withdrawing from Afghanistan, by the way. He got derailed even on that. In the end, Biden did it so he could prepare for the war against the Russians, as it turns out. And Biden did it in a way that was chaotic and humiliating and made them look pathetic. And Trump's withdrawal would have been no better. So, like, even where he'd actually negotiated something with the Taliban, like, he got derailed by his own appointees, people like Mark Esper and others in the Pentagon. Like, Trump's fucking pathetic. He really is. Like, he's distracted so easily, derailed so easily. He's an incredible coward as well. Like, the man who is only good at firing people on fucking TV. Like, this is your great conservative champion? Yeah. You fucking guys are full of shit. You always were. So it's not a surprise that you would pick a con man as your fucking hero. So what is the record of Trump as president? Standard Republican. Other than the noise, other than the rhetoric, other than the sales pitches, standard Republican. Didn't do a single damn thing that Mitt Romney wouldn't have done, or that Paul Ryan wouldn't have done, or that Mitch McConnell wouldn't have done. Lazy, cowardly, incompetent, easily confused, easily flattered, easily distracted, fucking idiot. Who governed in the end like a standard fucking Republican. And if you're saying that's your fucking hero, then you're a fucking idiot, to be blunt. Moving on. Kamala Harris, former employer of slave laborers from the state of California, a woman who sent many an innocent man to jail and kept him there. So, I won't go into the more seedy allegations against her. Others can look that up on the internet as you see fit. But let's deal with the fact that Kamala Harris, first of all, is obviously a fucking bullshit artist who pretended to be in favor of universal healthcare, who pretended to be in favor of, like, whatever you could call the Black Lives Matter agenda, whatever that might have been. I think it mainly revolved around buying certain leaders of Black Lives Matter mansions in California. I think that was the agenda. But she pretended to agree with that. She probably does agree with the latter part of it. She also, at various different stages, has tried to adopt some sort of strange sort of preacher woman act. She tries to act like she's some sort of a devotee of sort of black liberation theology at certain points, and completely fails to convince, because I'm convinced she's got about as much religion inside of her as a fucking dry roasted peanut. But I digress slightly. The other things about Kamala Harris that you have to know is that she, of course, secured almost no votes at all for the nomination in 2020. She was forced to drop out after one primary. Her campaign was a disaster that was built largely on vibes. There were various very wealthy bourgeois who invested in her who got nothing for their money back then. They got her in the end, though. And she is a complete and utter empty vessel. Now, some of them saw her as the sort of heir to Clinton and Obama, like a woman who was also, well, black when she chose to be, Indian when she chose to be, probably something else when she chose to be as well. It's like Kamala's ethnicity is like Hillary Clinton's accent, circumstantial. Depends upon who she's interacting with, what she chooses to emphasize. Now, the other big thing about our friend, the Vice President of the United States, of course, is that she has spent 4 years as the deputy to a man whose brain is dribbling out of his ears, and was backing him up right until the last minute when she was suddenly installed by those who really call the shots inside the Democratic Party. And at that point, she became the candidate. Now, Kamala Harris doesn't have a single original thought in her head. She's not even as good at acting as if she does, like Obama, who could come out with a long-winded stream of eloquent noise that, when you examine the words, meant absolutely nothing. Kamala tries to do that, but ends up just wrapping herself up in rhetorical and verbal knots and going absolutely nowhere with it, and sounding bizarre when she does so, and eventually bursting out into a nervous laugh, which she can never fully restrain, even when she's trying to be stateswoman-like. I look forward to the moment she accidentally declares war on Azerbaijan, giggles hysterically, and falls off a chair in the Oval Office due to having too much gin before making a speech. Now, of course, she has been part of the Biden administration for several years. She was put in charge of the southern border and apparently did nothing with it. Of course, why would she? There's no reason for the Democrats to change their policy on that. They just put her in charge of it to give her something to do. She has, of course, been part of an administration that carried out the largest single act of strike-breaking since the days of Ronald Reagan, when the Biden administration rammed a bill through Congress with the full support of the Republican Party and most of the Democrats to break the railroad strike. And here, of course, we get into the flagrant bullshitting of the left. We've had a look at the bullshitting of the right. Now let's have a look at the bullshitting of the left, which, of course, is just as plentiful. You have these morons, like, Kyle Kulinski and others like him, and the more intellectual liars, such as the denizens of Jacobin magazine and certain parts of the DSA, who will tell you with a straight face that having Biden or having Harris in the presidency gives space for organizing. Now, what the fuck does that even mean? The general argument is that by having Biden there gives some impetus to grassroots efforts at unionization. Given that Biden carried out the single most ruthless act of strike breaking since Reagan did in Patco in the early 1980s, that is an argument which just holds about as much water as a fucking thimble. It is a ridiculous argument. The idea that, Biden will appoint some slightly less hostile people to the Labor Board. Biden will appoint slightly less reactionary judges to federal courts, and maybe they'll hear union cases slightly better, slightly with slightly less hostile ears. None of this has proven to be true. Like, rates of unionization inside the United States, as far as I could see, have remained consistently stagnant over the last several decades. In fact, since the dramatic collapses in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. So unionization has remained exactly where it was inside the United States, which is going absolutely nowhere. The AFL-CIO remains basically an appendage of the American federal government. going nowhere, doing nothing. Well, actually, no, not doing nothing, but betraying workers at every single turn. And so some elements of the left, some flagrant bullshit artists, want to tell you that Kamala Harris is going to give space to unionization efforts. Fuck you and fuck off is the only shit I've got to say about that. That is a completely ludicrous case of wishful thinking. That is as bad and as delusional, every bit as delusional and every bit as dishonest as the people who claim that Trump is fighting the deep state. It is laughable. And if you believe that, then you need your fucking head examined. Your brain is as decayed as Joe Biden's. Or you're just a fucking liar. I'm going to go with most of you just being fucking liars. So there is no positive case to make for Harris, but let's turn though to one final case that it is made for her, which is that somehow she is associated with the enormous economic successes of the Biden administration. The Biden administration's economic success story doesn't exist. I know that there is growth in the US economy, but this is mainly growth that has been juiced by gigantic amounts of state spending. And this will evaporate like water hitting a hot frying pan before too long. The serious underlying problems within US capitalism have not gone away since 2008, and in fact have been there for a very, very long time. All Biden's gigantic amounts of spending have not improved the lives of the great majority of American workers one bit, nor will they. Most of it will just disappear off into the bank accounts of corporations and various individuals. The real sort of typifying moment for the entire Biden administration is when that tanker collided with the bridge in Baltimore and the whole thing fell into the sea. That's the Biden administration summed up in one image. Unable to commit to a firm deadline on repairing that bridge, and basically going to leave the thing a ruin for many years to come. That's the Biden administration. Spend a lot of money, but of course the money goes into a deeply corrupt system which doesn't want to invest anymore. And if it goes to corporations, it just gets siphoned off into bank accounts where they do stock buybacks with it. The economic growth of the Biden years is illusory. Any tiny wage increase that workers got wiped out easily by the rates of inflation that were triggered partially by Trump's actions and partially by Biden's. And I say partially by Trump's actions because it's Trump who oversaw the gigantic amounts of federal spending in the form of bailouts to Wall Street in 2020. And Biden carried on with those policies, but now done through direct fiscal stimulus form in 2021, 2022, 2023. So the inflation crisis, which wiped out any marginal gain that any American workers might have made, is the responsibility of the entire system, of course, but you can hang it around the neck of Biden, but also Harris. She was involved at every step of the way as well. While I say involved in the same way that someone who's like blind drunk watching a football game is involved. They feel like they're in the action, but there's no danger of them intercepting a pass. So, but Harris sits in the second chair. She is the second in command, theoretically, in the administration. She is as responsible as Biden for this class war that Biden has waged upon American workers, which is what Biden has been doing. Inflation, really, is a attack upon the living standards of the American worker, partially, of course, caused by various different factors, but a big part of it is, of course, price gouging, which American corporations continue to do. They continue to gouge the American worker. Harris is pretending she's going to do some sort of price controls. She's not even going to do Richard Nixon's price controls. Yeah, because as soon as she hinted at that, of course, all the American corporations ran to the press and started screaming, "You're going to tell me that this Democratic Party is going to force through fucking price controls? Are they hell?" Only if they've got a literal gun to the head. And if the American worker has a gun to the head of the Democratic Party, well, then he might as well go ahead and make a revolution. Because at that stage, what's the point in keeping the Democratic Party around anyway, if you've got to that point? So Harris, no positive case there to make. Trump, no positive case there to make. Both being recommended by people in so-called alternative media who are projecting onto these candidates things that they want to see, which do not exist in the real world. This is an election with no real choice to be made for the American worker. Both of these characters are enemies and will wage war upon the American worker on behalf of capital. Trump's already said he's going to do that. Harris is pretending that she's not going to, but these are all funded by the same people. It is the same class interests. And in the end, Larry Fink of BlackRock summed it up quite well when he said that in his mind, it didn't really matter who won, as both would be good for Wall Street. And there is a man you should take 100% at his word when he says things like that, because his analysis is absolutely on point, because he can speak for his class without fear of retribution. And here we will, of course, pause. And I will now take the comments in the chat. Right. We have in the chat tonight our first moderator. So congratulations to Jenny, who volunteered for that task. I've given you the appropriate rights. Please do not institute a reign of terror just yet. I jest, of course. Right, so we're going to go through the comments from the top, so it may take me a while to get through things. Hello to Nehat, who joins us from Turkey. Hello to President Jesus, who says, I downloaded The Running Man and the new cut of Caligula. I do need to catch up with that cut, actually, to watch tonight instead of the election results. More inspirational and less obscene than this shit. Yeah, I mean, if Caligula was on the ballot, or maybe Caligula's horse, you'd have better options. Hello to Robeson, who joins us from Indonesia. HM says, the Pope said vote for the lesser evil. The Pope has officially endorsed evil. Popes have been endorsing evil since the 4th century. So no surprise there. Hello to More Time Needed, who joins us from Skeggy. That is Skegness. Good evening to Not a Pacifist, who joins us from the, he refers to as the belly of the beast. Hello to Ash, joining us from Down Under. Good to have you with us, comrade. Hello to Anthony, who joins us from Prague. Aziz joins us from American-occupied Australia. Hello again to Jenny. Hello to Comrade Jawad, who joins us. Hello to Kawa Justiniano. Hello to Anthony. Hello to Me Panther. Hello to Sway Guevara. Hello to Enigma, Comrade Ian Foster, Bishi Barnaby, Comrade Terry Eaton, David King, Luter92, Arnold. We got N. Minkovsky, who says, love the Soviet-Ukrainian anthem, never heard it before joining this channel. I had to go and look it up, and it's such a beautiful piece of music, and creates such feelings of sadness and anger within me when I hear it, which I've, of course, gone into the reasons for that before. Hello to Edward, who's joining us from the Baltic, who says, let's vote. Do you think tonight Alexander is going to be Trump bro or a K-Hive supporter? Well, I think I've answered your question there, Edward. Good to have you with us. Hello to Alan in Peachtree City, Georgia, city of golf carts, tuning in to make me feel sane around all these Trump supporters. I see that the Georgian authorities were claiming that they'd uncovered a Russian bomb plot in Georgia. The state of Georgia, that is, which seems to me the most insane claim I've heard all day, which is really saying something. Hello to Luca, who joins us, who says, my idea before today was that ballot rigging would keep Kamala close to Trump, but let's see. It's true that Trump phenomenon is overhyped by both his fans and his enemies. Exactly right. Hello to Lee Williams, who joins us. Hello to Zim Left Radio. Hello to Comrade Daniel, who says, evening, comrades, on the night of a battle between a giant douche and a turd sandwich. That is a South Park reference, if I'm remembering things correctly. Hello to Edward Allen. Me Panther says, I just watched a video in which Gabriel Rockhill endorsed Hasbara Harris. You can't make this shit up. Never, ever trust an academic. I will just say that and leave it there. I mean, look, to be honest, and I'm not actually now going to break my own vow and say, I said that what I said on Telegram, which is Rockhill is still part of the US left. Like, I see he's distanced himself from the ACP. He still endorses identity politics. He still endorses bourgeois environmentalism. Like, he's written some useful things, but again, like, I saw him do a presentation on how liberalism prepares the way for fascism. Apparently, he hasn't listened to his own presentation, because I can't believe that he actually thinks that Harris is in any way preferable to Trump, or the opposite way around. Like, there's no good option here, and for him to pretend that Harris is somehow going to preserve democratic rights over Trump, who's going to destroy them, that is bullshit either way. You cannot claim that the Democrats are going to be preserving democratic rights, given that what they have done in terms of the Democratic Party's war on free speech rights, given that it was the Democratic Party who imprisoned Julian Assange in the first place, given that it was the Democratic Party who keeps demanding more restrictions on speech rights of Americans. And you can't, oh, by the way, just in case we're unclear about this, you can't make the free speech for Donald Trump either, given that he has spent the last year screaming that anybody who's making pro-Palestine statements should be locked up for doing so, or should be denied an education if it's with reference to college campus protests, and that pro-Palestine protests should be beaten up and arrested by the cops. So you can't make a free speech defense claim or a defense of the Constitution claim for either of these fuckers. And for Rockhill to claim that about Harris means that he's full of shit. I'm going to be completely blunt about this guy. He's full of shit. And I would then say you should approach the rest of his work with caution, because if he's prepared to go on the air and lie on behalf of Kamala fucking Harris, well, then that means you should read the rest of what he says with a good deal of skepticism. Because if he's prepared to lie about that, and by the way, I don't think he believes that for a second. I think he's saying that to keep in with certain people, which means he's fucking weak, means he's a fucking liar. There we go. Whatever bridge existed there has been burnt. Let's carry on. Let's have a look here. Who else we got here? Hello to Harry. Hello to TL Orca. Hello to Anthony McKeown, who asked the question, loathsome puppets though they both are, which, Harris or Trump, might conceivably be better for the long-suffering people of Palestine and Lebanon? Neither. Both are worse, to answer your question there, Anthony. I mean, President Maduro actually had a good line on this. President Nicolas Maduro. He was asked in a recent interview who would be better for Venezuela, and he said, I'll quote him directly, "I say whoever wins, what's better for Venezuela and Latin America is to have our own path, not depend on anyone." And that is exactly right. Who is better for the people of Lebanon and the people of Palestine? Themselves. Their allies in the axis of resistance. Their alliance with Iran. What is best for them is the breakdown of American domination over West Asia. It is themselves that their alliances in the region that they should rely on the best. And they know this. They know this very well. They know this better than anybody in the West. They know very well that it doesn't fucking matter which of these clowns wins. That the US commitment to preserving their colony in occupied Palestine remains the same. The policy will not change that much, whether it is Harris, whether it is Trump. Trump will say more obnoxious things. Harris will do the same things whilst wringing her hands. No difference. Plan accordingly. Right. Abolish NATO, hello to you. Good name. Hello to Alistair Page McGill. Thanks for joining us. Hello to Tim Gray. And hello to Almir, who joins us from Slovenia, the once and future Yugoslavia. Bruce Albert says, filled in Steinbox here. Since I am not in Tamil Nadu province in India, no Joseph Stalin option. Be worth moving to Tamil Nadu, maybe just to vote for a guy called Joseph Stalin. Who knows? Maybe I'll do that. Thank you, Bishy, for saying the phrase of the day, which is smash that like button. Indeed, you should. Like, share, and subscribe if you haven't done so already. Good evening to Sid, who joins us from a warm Cincinnati area. Hello to Vera, and hello to Muzzle Paint, who joins us from the shadow of the Imperial Corps on the eastern shore of Maryland. Hello to Victor, good evening to you. Hello to Keel Jones, who says, J6 was hilarious. I was laughing as it was happening. Yes, indeed. Hello to Albert. And Sid says, I went and voted for Jill Stein. She was on the ballot this time, and I voted no on charter schools in Kentucky. Kentucky or KY? I don't know what the KY stands for. On a ridiculous amendment to stop non-citizens from voting. Yes. Democracy was saved by Mike Pence, says Almir. Yes. I'd always like to laugh when you hear like Harris going, you know, they threatened Mike Pence. I can't do a Harris impression at all. But it's amazing that they think that the average American is going to be moved by a threat to the life of Mike Pence. Moved to laughter, maybe. Keel Jones says about Kamala Harris, jailer of parents of truant children. Well, you know, Keir Starmer would do the same thing here, to be honest. Jenny says, we'll see if I start filling out that Russian work visa paperwork tonight. Yeah, I better go back to those Russian lessons. Sid says, this ballot measure to introduce an amendment to stop non-citizens from voting had provisions written in to prohibit idiots and insane persons, non-legal language, from voting also. So basically, if they can declare you to be insane, they can declare you to be a non-voter. Interesting. Alan says, I'll admit I did freak out a little on January the 6th for a short minute when it seemed like a right-wing takeover. I do think they were proto-fascist psychos, but I could say the same of Kamala. Indeed, indeed. If the American bourgeois wanted to run a coup, as John Bolton implied, they could do it quite easily. They wouldn't need like this gaggle of battle reenactors, MAGA guys to do it. Like they wouldn't need Jacob Charnsley, the QAnon shaman, as he's called. Though he was, of course, I mean, January the 6th was also a stitch up, lest we forget that, which what you saw later on that the Capitol Police let a lot of them in. They showed Charnsley to the main chamber and let him take photos there. Why were they doing that? Somebody was stitching all of this up. For what reason? Well, again, nothing ever happens just for one reason. So there was a reason for that. Maybe there were multiple motivations in action, yeah, but certainly there was a reason for stitching those people up. Keel Jones says, seems like the MK Ultra'd Kamala after her I was that girl on the bus debate comment. She has not been able to form a coherent sentence since then. Yeah, I mean, it's a bit of an odd one that. On that very first debate, she sort of did all right. And then I don't know if she changed her medication or started taking a new form of mescaline or something, but it just seemed to become a completely giggling imbecile. Or maybe it's like she always has this, in all the videos I've seen, she's got this slightly nervous laugh, which I think comes from the fact that she is aware on some level just how incapable she is, and that she is completely unsuited for the roles that she's in. That's where I think the nervous laughter comes from. I'm not a psychiatrist. I can't even pretend to be one. But that's my analysis. Almir says, why are you against Kamala? Trump says she's a communist, so we must support her. I'm with her. Yes, indeed. And if Trump says it, it must be true. Yeah, Joe Rogan fucking says it as well. Because it's the dumb rich people season. Dumb rich people are declaring in every direction for both candidates. You've got a collection of fucking Hollywood reprobates who probably have a lot of blackmail material being held over them, going and endorsing Kamala, and you got the fucking dumb rich dudes like Joe Rogan and, of course, Pentagon contractor Elon Musk's declaring for Trump. I mean, and Russell Brand as well. rapists for Trump. Daniel says, how my views have changed in 4 years. Used to believe that Biden would be the hope for all America when he was elected. How naive I was. Well, I used to be a Trotskyite until a few years ago, Daniel, so views change quickly. And as Albert observes, coming over to a revolutionary consciousness sometimes takes decades. If you've done it in 4 years, you're well ahead of the curve, mate. Keel Jones says Trump cut his death calling for the death of the innocent black teens, the Central Park Five. Indeed, he did. Good catch there, because I missed that out. Sid says the problem with that is there are a lot of people who believe that Kamala actually is a socialist. That's the danger in that rhetoric. There are a few people that do. I mean, on the right and the left, there's people who believe that Harris is going to institute some kind of welfare capitalism. There's people who believe that she's literally like the reincarnation of fucking Chairman Mao, both of which is equally deluded. Scott says people don't know what socialism or capitalism means, and that's a good point from Scott. You're led astray deliberately. They never want you to be able to define what either of those things mean. Keel Jones says Trump's interview with Joe Rogan was a battle of low IQs. Yeah, I mean, I've never had much time for Rogan, to be honest. I mean, I've watched a few of his podcasts. Like I never really understood his appeal, like as a comedian either. I didn't find him particularly funny. And didn't he get his big break in like a sitcom with Phil Hartman, like 30 years ago or something? Like, I mean, Rogan is just like a complacent rich guy, like who's into like complacent rich guy shit, and he's not particularly intelligent. That's why he does a podcast where most of the time he talks about like cryptids and Bigfoot sightings. And like, it's why he didn't ask Trump a single insightful question. It's why Trump wanted to go back on. Someone as dumb as he is. Let's go through here. What else we got? Alan says the first person I voted for in an election was Hillary Clinton, who I hated, but who nonetheless got more votes but lost anyway. American democracy. Well, the Electoral College is still there for a reason, and that is as an insurance policy, as I said earlier. An insurance policy for the bourgeoisie. Let's go through. Hello to RVA Klavek, who's joined us. Almir says, don't forget the gerrymandering. That's true. Ash says, CNN exit poll says state of democracy was top issue for voters. I bet it fucking wasn't. The thing you have to ask there is, well, which fucking voters? Who? 5 people they caught coming out of a polling station in the Hamptons on their way to a golf game, or probably on their way to cocktail night, The Pan American says, nice Trump impression for an Englishman. Well, I need to confess, it is basically just me ripping off Shane Gillis. I'm doing an impression of an impression. But it's quite easy to do when you look at it like that. Actually, the two things that inform my Trump impression are Shane Gillis and his Trump impression, which I think is very funny, and the guy who used to do Trump with in the double act with James Adomian when James Adomian was doing Sanders, Anthony Atamanuik, who I know is like a liberal-brained fucking New York actor, but his Trump impression was funny when him and Adomian were doing those two, doing that sort of Bernie and Trump double act. Genuinely, and also the president show that they had on Comedy Central with Atamanuik as Trump was actually pretty good. I have to admit that I did watch that because they didn't just go for like the standard lib shit. The writing on it was actually pretty good, and they did do some lib shit, some pandering shit, but the actual sketches Atamanix's performance was actually one of the best like impersonations of Trump. And like they made it ridiculous and they made it surreal and it was funny. I think the longer he did it, I think he probably got more pressure to make it into just standard lib shit. And now I think he's just like screaming on Twitter to vote for Harris. So never trust an actor. There you go. There's a reason why the Romans held them to be the lowest profession. Almir says in reference to Trump, he's on meth probably so he can still do those long speeches. That is true. Ash says Trump polling better with non-whites this time, but is down with whites without college degrees, like in 2020. Yeah, I mean, it's about time. I suppose this leads us into prediction territory. I am going to make a prediction which risks me looking like an idiot when I get this wrong, but here we go. I think Harris will get it, but it'll be the narrowest of margins. Like, I mean, most of the polling, if you look at like the aggregated polls, like even like the New York Times, the best they can do is like put Harris up by 1. And in most of these swing states, like Pennsylvania, dead heat, like North Carolina, Trump by 1, Nevada, Trump by 1, Michigan, Harris by 1. Again, this is all like 49-48. Trump is ahead by 1 in Georgia. Wisconsin, Harris ahead by 1. Arizona, that's slightly more in favor of Trump. That's Trump by 3, 50-47. So, like, this is a knife edge race if you believe the aggregate polling, and I think it is going to be fairly accurate. Like the gap between them is tiny. It could go either way. It's all been just different versions of Reagan for the past 40 years. Well, to be fair to Ronnie, he was a much better actor than this fucking bunch. Sid Hatfield says, Trump is deeply embedded with what many of his fans would otherwise call the deep state, certain generals and Delta Force and Navy SEAL operatives. Yeah, he's surrounded by, like, fucking state agents, you know? Sid says, which exploded the national debt? The tax cut. Yeah. And they don't care about it when it does that, when it goes in their favor. Jenny says Massey is like the most based guy in Congress. That's true. Ash says apparently Harris' campaign has sent the actors from the Avengers to college campuses in swing states. Well, fucking hell. I mean, why would you be impressed by that? Seriously. Like, I mean, I could see you being impressed by that if you're 10. Or like below 10, you could be impressed by like, well, who are they sending out these days? I mean, why would you be impressed by Mark Ruffalo, given that he's a fucking CGI character most of the time as the Hulk? Who else are they going to send like that? Send out like fucking Robert Downey Jr., who doesn't give a shit anymore. He's now playing Doctor Doom behind a mask or whatever the fuck it is he's doing. Don Cheadle, who is a good actor, but like, why would you be impressed that, you know, he'd turn up, or any of them, to be honest? Like, why on earth would you be impressed by that if you're 18 years old? Like, you should have left that shit behind when you were 10. Scott says Pence actually knew what he was doing as vice president, unfortunately. Yeah. Pence was running that administration because Pence knew how to get shit done that was the standard Republican agenda. Ash says, Michael Tracy has done a good job of pointing out how these dissident platforms give Trump softball interviews and do not mention Trump's establishment leanings. Yeah, I mean, I got to mention some of this shit. I mean, like, some of these fucking, like, so-called dissidents, like, should just be labeled as regime media. Because that's what they've turned themselves into, because that's where the money is. Like, you got fucking Jimmy Dore babbling on about how Trump's going to end the wars. Like, on what fucking basis is he saying that, other than the fact that he's high on his own supply? I'm told he's stopped the weed. Maybe he's high on his own fucking farts, because you cannot believe that. You lived through 4 years of Trump. Did he stop any of the wars? No. And people who are supposedly better informed than Jimmy fucking Dore have said that. Like, I saw Mercouris of the Duran do a ludicrous video where he claimed that the world was a more stable place under Donald Trump. I mean, fuck me, I hope he's on crack, because otherwise that's an inexcusable series of lies that he's just told there. Because you cannot argue that fact. Like, you cannot say, as Mercouris and Dore and others have claimed, that Trump was what? Sorting out the Ukraine issue? Trump was making the Ukraine issue worse. Trump made it objectively worse than he found it. Like, okay, it wasn't just him. He didn't do it on his own. There was a whole scheme in place there to do to Ukraine what has been done to Ukraine. Did Trump stop it in any way? Did he try and get in the way? Well, he did once threaten to pause a weapons shipment for, again, petty personal reasons. Did he improve relations with Russia as he said he wanted to? No, he walked out of the INF treaty. He made relations with Russia objectively worse than they had been under Obama. So how is that ending the wars or securing peace or whatever the fuck it is that these idiots and opportunists and liars in the so-called alternative media want to say it is? It's not doing anything of the kind. Again, like, I have to go back to like this absolute willful blindness and, quite frankly, lying that people are engaged in here. Because, again, like, on Ukraine, made everything worse. On relations with China, made it worse. Again, it was always going to get worse, no matter if Jesus Christ himself had shown up and been given the presidency, it would have got worse, because that's just how American imperialism is degenerating, and it has an objective need to destroy both Russia and China. So, to a certain extent, it didn't matter who was there, but let's deal with the claims that are being made, which is that Trump's going to secure peace. No, he's not. He didn't for 4 years last time. What makes you think that he's going to do it this time? When he's bringing back guys like Mike Pompeo, when he's still going to have Jared Kushner around him. He's still going to have that whole network that Pompeo brings with him. His number one leading donor is Miriam fucking Adelson. So what? And how was Trump any better when it came to West Asia? What was the condition of life for the Palestinians under Trump? Well, it was so bad that it produced the needs to do the Operation Al-Aqsa flood. Because Trump was trying to strangle the life out of the Palestinian liberation movement by binding all of the Arab states openly to Israel. And it was the need to reignite the Palestinian war of national liberation that caused Al-Aqsa flood to be planned and executed in the first place. So Trump led directly to, through his actions, to the Russian special military operation, because Trump again pushed Ukraine closer and closer to all-out war with Russia. Biden completed the process, but Trump played his part in making it so. Trump wanted to strangle the remaining life out of the Palestinian national liberation struggle. Biden continued down the same path. Trump is pursuing a line of aggression against China. Biden continued a line of aggression against China that had been begun by Obama. Again, this is about the needs of American imperialism. American imperialism requires China and Russia to be broken and subordinated to their will so that their resources and their labor can be hyper-exploited by American imperialism and its allies in the form of the British and the Europeans. That's an objective requirement. Doesn't change no matter who's in the White House. But again, we must deal with the claims that are made, and Trump was a loyal servant of that requirement. And to say that he wasn't is absolutely ridiculous. It's as ridiculous as Gabriel Rockhill lying for Kamala Harris, which is what he was doing. Fucking coward. All right, moving on. Though yes, Ashley's right about Michael Tracy, in full fairness to him, has been one of the few who's consistently pointed out the bullshitting. Oh yeah, and of course, as Almir points out, Trump, of course, objectively made relations with Iran worse. And again, these fucking alt media shitheads, like, completely ignoring that. Why? Well, make your own mind up on that. My mind goes towards the fact that a lot of these people are networked into like pro-Trump elements, and think that that's a way for them to score bigger clicks on YouTube and make some money. I think it's cynicism a lot of the time. Hello to Crow Feather, who joins us on Rumble. Going through the comments here. Brian Williams is hosting the election night coverage for Amazon. Well, Jeff Bezos sure does know how to hire them, doesn't he? Riz Costadino says, I honestly think that Trump is a dumb guy, and he agrees with everyone that talks to him and glaze him. If people around him talk to him like Joe Rogan, he will enforce all of their policies. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. named one of his sons, Joseph, to one of Joseph McCarthy, who chaired the House Un-American Activities Committee. Robert F. Kennedy, yeah. Well, the Kennedys are rabid anti-communists, always were. Like, again, like the Kennedy mythology is just bullshit. Like, JFK and RFK got killed by I would call them the fascist wing of the American ruling class, because those people are so rabid and insane that even Richard Nixon got a bit too dangerously radical for them. It didn't make them any better. It didn't make them any less of servants of imperialism. It just means that U.S. imperialism was in such a, shall we say, frenzied state between like 1945 and really the mid-80s. And its ruling class was so paranoid that there was a strong pro-fascist element within the ruling class reflected within the state machine of the United States that on multiple occasions intervened to try and steer things in their direction. Never quite worked out the way that the pro-fascist elements wanted it to work out due to potential resistance of American domestic opinion and also military defeats inside places like Vietnam. But there's a powerful pro-fascist element inside the American ruling class and inside the American state machine. And anybody who was to the left of like, the John Birch Society was too much for them. And so that's why they offed the Kennedys. Doesn't make the Kennedys one iota better, though. Just means that the history of the United States is a history that is a lot more unstable and a lot more turbulent, and it features events which have steered that nation much closer to collapse and implosion than we have known. It was always portrayed when I was like a teenager growing up in Britain in the 90s that like it was always the Soviet Union that was on the edge of collapse, because ultimately it was the Soviet Union that suffered an internal counter-revolution. But I would argue that what the events of the 1960s really show was that pro-fascist element in the American state, reflecting the fascist wing of the American ruling class, that element came pretty damn close to collapsing the American state on a couple of occasions, and would have been willing to, and was looking to impose their will by assassinating political leaders. Not just Kennedy and his brother, but also Malcolm X, also MLK, and also ultimately the overthrow of Nixon, who had got too liberal for them. That was part of the motivation for Watergate. Jessica Fitz says, I've seen your flag on the Marble Arch, but love is not a victory march. Oh, yes. Hallelujah by, Leonard Cohen. Done also by Jeff Buckley, but I prefer the Leonard Cohen version. Yes, people listing Trump's myriad crimes. That's everybody knows the score there, it seems. Adam Watson says Trump, I'll just highlight the comment, was off duty 60% of the time in his first term. Yeah, I mean, he's off duty almost as much as Biden, because the president's not really necessary for him to be there. I mean, Mike Pence was probably doing long hours, doing evil shit, but he was certainly putting in the hours. Hello to Marius, who joins us. Neil Keel Jones says Kamala Harris equals the giggler from Death Wish 3. Now there's a reactionary film. Good old Michael Winner. Funny film. All of them hide behind a Bible to differential degrees, says Daniel. That's true. Riz Costadino says Kamala's dad was a Marxist. She's a disappointment. Yeah, well, as Jenny says, her own father disowned her. Pete Buttigieg's dad was a Marxist and was the translator of the Gramsci works into English in the United States. Don't go with that translation. Edward says, when will the American Communist Party be elected? Well, drop them a line, see what they say. I know they're planning to stand for office in certain areas, or at least that seems to be part of their plan. Couldn't give you an answer to that one, though, Edward. Marius says, I've heard American leftists say this for literally 20 years, and each Democrat from Clinton to Biden has gotten more hostile to Labour. It's a bankrupt argument. Yeah, and like most bankrupt things, the American left still keeps pushing it. Just scrolling through some more comments here. Marius says their argument is that she was on the picket line for 10 minutes, therefore Harris is an ally of workers. Well, Trump went to the fucking picket line as well. Is he an ally? I mean, some will argue he is, but like, again, he's no more or no less of an enemy than Kamala is. Keel Jones says, Kyle Kalinske and Sam Cedar have never been in the same room with an actual working class person in their lives. Well, Kyle Kalinske might have been on a near a groundsman at a golf course, which probably made him feel very uncomfortable. Just a Maverick says that, I think in reference to Kamala, she will quicken the downfall of the US more than anyone else. That's really positive. The downfall can't be stopped now because the US ruling class just doesn't have the capability of stopping it at this stage. This is, I mean, to a certain extent, who the president is doesn't matter so much. But if you were planning a serious national revival, you'd want a better figurehead than either of these fucking idiots. Yeah, Trump has some great comedic moments. That's the only thing you can say about him, or he did do. I can't laugh at him anymore, though, because he's been in power now, and he's done some really evil shit. Marius says, CNN literally said that workers complaining about grocery and gas prices were duped by Russian disinformation. Totally shameless. Oh, they've said the same thing here. They're going to keep saying that until the moment that the tires around their necks and burning, you know? Going through the comments here. Yep, 5 bomb threats were apparently ascribed to Russia targeting Georgia. Jesus. Klavik says, voted for Gilstein just to protest. Yeah, it's not a particularly positive vote. Stein's pretty shit, but I can understand using the Green Party as a protest vote at this stage. Nurshady2 says the Russians are the only ones that have read the US elections well and determined that there will be no change of policy, regardless of who wins. Yeah, they have come to understand that, I mean, Putin does understand the US system. He said this 8 years ago when he was doing an interview with Oliver Stone, 7 years ago, that it doesn't matter who wins, the policy stays the same. And they have finally come to understand that. And so they are correct in that. But I would say that we are in the stage of the Ukraine war now where there is haggling going on. Doesn't matter who the president is. I mean, when it comes to the question of Ukraine, the more serious people in the Pentagon know that it's a lost cause. So there is going to be haggling going on. I saw an article by John Helmer on the Dances with Bears website, who, again, he's reporting basically comes from a source he has in the Russian general staff or close to it, claiming that there's new plans being considered for essentially like the Russians to take all of Novorossiya down to Odessa, and for the west of Ukraine essentially to be left to, well, either some sort of Bandera land or become Bandera land or be absorbed into Poland, and that there will be a huge demilitarized zone in the middle, basically a sort of no man's land between NATO and the Russian Federation, which will include like Kiev, like a sort of a neutral zone, and that is seemingly part of what is being haggled about behind the scenes between the US and the Russians at the moment, which is how this is going to end. There will never be a formal agreement on any of this, by the way. There will be an understanding reached in the end between the US and the Russian leaderships. That will happen regardless of who is president, because the negotiations will be done by permanent officials from the State Department and the Pentagon and the CIA and their equivalents in Russia. Edward asks, can occupied Korea rejoin the DPRK and form a united Korea? Yes, but they'd need to remove the US occupation first. I mean, comrades who I trust have told me that, like, occupied Korea is much closer to being on the verge of revolution than you would otherwise know, and I can believe that, given the immiseration that has taken place there. So keep an eye on the occupied part of Korea. Things might get interesting there. So apparently Scott Ritter said Trump is the only option to save America. Well then, he needs to lay off the Diet Coke, doesn't he? NK says Harris is a vapid vessel for Sullivan and Blinken, and to vocalize the sociopathic global domination fantasy agenda. She was high as a kite. Yep. Sev Rem Ik Dost says Trump still brags about his peace deal with the DPRK, still talks about DPRK even though this would not bring him anything at this point. I think he truly is the lesser of evil by a small margin. There was no peace deal with the DPRK. Again, this is like classic Trump. Even when he wanted to do something vaguely positive, he was incapable of pursuing it. He let Bolton and Pompeo derail it, and now he won't get that opportunity again. So, like, he to him, the fact that he walked around with Kim Jong-un and shook his hand, that's it. That's as good as having a peace deal. He's not the lesser evil. Like, he talks a lot of shit and says he wants to do things that people find appealing, and then he's completely incapable of pursuing them. Like, the DPRK thing is an absolutely classic example of it. And by the way, like, the DPRK thankfully saw through what the agenda of Trump would have been, which is to essentially weaken the DPRK by doing peace deals with it, which is what that would have been about. Yeah, Finkelstein said correctly that he wouldn't vote for either of these clowns. Even John Mearsheimer adopted a better position than Rockhill, you know? Even Jeffrey Sachs adopted a better position than that. Marius says all leftists to embrace the liberal side of the culture war are Democrats in denial, no matter how much they claim not to be Democrats, especially if they are academics. And Marius is absolutely right about that. There is no such thing as Western Marxism, by the way. The Western Marxism became social democracy in about 1945, and there's no Western Marxism since then. It's dead. It's Marxism will only come back to the West, the imperialist countries, via the experiences of the Soviet Union, China, Cuba, Vietnam, and other socialist countries and other struggles. The West and left tradition is long since died. There's nothing of value there. Well, Salon says Kamala should be smart. Isn't she a lawyer? I've met quite a few lawyers in this country. Some of them are not smart people, not smart in the slightest. Often, in the two legal cases I've been involved in, and these were employment cases, where I've been in like court settings. The lawyer in our case, the lawyers are referred to as QCs, Queen's Counsels, was basically just having the brief fed to him by the solicitor who had done all the work on the case. He was just presenting it. He had no capability to think for himself. Yes, James Adomian's Zedek impression is great. In fact, I recommend most of like Adomian's impressions. Like he's one of the most talented comedians working at the moment in terms of like his impression of Zizek is fantastic. NK says Rogan is perfect for the American Reich's era of interminable decline. Let him model smoking pot, which US empire oligarchs don't want legalized, because it weakens peasants' will to labor for crumbs. Well, some of the American oligarchy definitely wants it legalized because they make an awful lot of money off it. Big Tobacco's got into it in a major way. Yeah, well, you know what? Endorsing one of these two fucking clowns, like whether it's Trump or Harris, just reveals you to be an unserious person. It really does. Like, if you can't, how feeble is it that you can't stand up to like peer pressure? You know, if all your mates are, especially if you're some sort of so-called intellectual or you're some kind of so-called dissident, and like you're just following the fucking crowd of like your mates voting for one of these two fucking idiots, and you're gonna go out there and lie for them? Fuck off, seriously. Just yeah, tune out the Jimmy Dore shit. I stopped watching that fucking guy ages ago. Like, again, he's another one prepared to make excuses for like the worst criminals possible on the grounds that some of them are like periodically nice to him. Again, complete liberalism. Marius says Trump almost started a war with Iran when he murdered Soleimani and he escalated the new Cold War with China. All true. Sid says Jimmy's show reached its permissible ascension in 2020, around the time the CARES Act was passed. I think he had a visitor sometime after that. You never know. You never know. But I would say it's just as likely that he was reached a certain point and then looked for a way to secure that position. And the way to secure that position is basically aligning with pre-existing power structures. Yeah, Peter Thiel is definitely one scary scumbag. Caleb Maupin supports Trump. Is he in the same group? Well, he's not a communist anymore, is he? He's an innovationist. And what's the innovation here? What, supporting Trump and innovation? Again, what's the justification for that? That Trump is the peace candidate? That's manifestly untrue. And Caleb Maupin is not a stupid man. He knows all the things I've said here about Trump. He knows. So if that's his position, again, I haven't watched his video on that, but if that's his position, I would struggle to see how he could possibly justify that. J.R. Shield says Rockhill is afraid of losing his job as a philosophy professor at Villanova. Well, then just don't say anything. Don't comment on the election. If it's that serious, you know? Just scrolling through. Is Kamala a social democrat or a democratic socialist? Well, she could probably join DSA. I mean, what was the old it was the old slogan that they were putting around like 5 or 6 years ago. Be gay, do crimes, join DSA. Kamala's done some crimes. I'm sure she could join DSA. They'd probably welcome her at this stage. Alan makes a good point. Says George W. Bush ran as an anti-war candidate in 2000, much like Trump is now. I remember that. It's true. George W. Bush ran a campaign attacking Clinton and Gore, who was obviously the candidate back then, for what he called failed nation-building adventures in the 2000 presidential debates. So he actually attacked Gore for the Kosovo War and things like it, for wasting money. So like W back then, as Alan correctly points out, sounds a little bit like Trump now. And yet, of course, we all know what W's real record was. So again, learn some fucking history. Think back longer than 5 minutes. I am just scrolling through here. Yeah, Kyle Kalinske will ban anybody from his chat who dares mention his hair coloring. Yeah, Marius comes up with the quote. But George W. Bush says, I don't want America to be the policeman of the world. I was good at a George W. Bush impression once. I'm going to have to bring it back. Yeah, well, Almir says that he used to like Kalinske. I watched Kalinske's channel a while back, like 5 or 6 years ago. You move on. Hello to Shanika McAdams, who joins us. DPRK apparently blew up the building that Kim and Trump met in. See, I like that style. Yeah, who's still watching Cal Kalinske? Like, who's still watching that? Who's still watching him, like, shill for the Democratic Party and become, like, even like a pale shadow of his own former self? Like, who's still on board with that? It's like, who's still watching TYT? Like, who's still watching, like, Cenk Uygur bellow about, we got to get the money out of politics, or whatever the fuck it is he's saying these days. I mean, I've got to go in a minute because I am booked on at the to do a special guest appearance at the election night party being hosted by Barry Weiss. I'm on there as the Marxist comedian. Apparently, my series of gags about Netanyahu's sons is going to go across really well, and Anna Kasparian's there, of course. I, of course, jest I have received no such invite. But again, like if you take a look at who's on the invite list for that shit, as I said on Twitter, hell is empty and the demons are all here. Yes, Red Horizon, this channel is for criticizing absolutely fucking everybody. And if you don't like it, you can take yourself the fuck out of here. Right. Moving on then. Yeah, so we will see when the exit poll comes in, what's going to go on. Or like what that comes out as, though that won't give us, of course, the full picture. I mean, I'm gonna stick with my prediction that I reckon that Harris will squeeze it out, um, mainly because I think that Trump basically fucked up his campaign again. I saw recently like Trump's ground game in a lot of these states is apparently shit. That he's like outsourced a lot of work to like third party companies. That like Trump and the campaign like are really strong in certain areas and like they have a very strong internet presence, but like their real world work lags behind, and it lags behind the Democratic Party and what they've been doing. So I think the thing with Trump, like this, the Trump campaign makes a lot of noise, gets a lot of name recognition, but can Trump turn out like the voters in the same way that the Democratic Party obviously has a better operation and has been stronger at doing? Can Trump overcome the historic weaknesses in that the Republican coalition has, and the fact that they've not won a majority in a presidential election for 20 years, and even that's contested? Can he overcome that? I don't think he can. I don't think he can. I think if he was up against Biden, who's such an obvious fucking, brain dead stooge and a criminal, he would probably win. The diagnoses that the Democratic Party hierarchy did was if they just put literally anybody else in there and ran a campaign where based on vibes and saying nothing, that they could get away with it. And I think they're probably going to get away with it. As I said, I don't think that on over anything substantive this will matter at all. I think the Russian government's judgment is actually correct. And domestically, it'll be a war on the working class, whether it's got Harris or Trump as the front person for it. But yeah, for what it's worth, Harris will get crowned. And, just hope that they cut to Hillary Clinton's face when she's aiming that sniper rifle at Kamala, screaming that it should have been her. Okay, so yeah, and as Sid says, Trump's got Elon Musk declaring that they're going to implement neoliberal shock therapy on the American people once they're in office. Yeah, you don't say that before the election. You save that for after the election when you do it. And again, like, what is Elon going to cut back on wasteful spending at the Pentagon? Of course he's not. And it probably wouldn't get done even in the way that Musk would be in favor of it. You're not going to get like a Milei in the United States, I don't think. Even the large elements in the ruling class don't want that destabilization element. They do want to slowly force down the living standards of American workers, though, because, as I have said ad nauseum, the only way you're going to get reindustrialization in the United States is, well, there's two ways. One is, of course, force down the living standards of the American worker to the point where it is profitable to employ American labor again. Or two, carry out such egregious and horrific acts of imperialism that U.S. capitalism domestically is able to recover in a somewhat more sustainable basis. Now, they're not, given that they're losing in Ukraine, they can't beat the Chinese. The Israeli colonial outpost is losing in the war against Hamas, Hezbollah, and Iran. Where can they find a victory? And I will just flag a warning as to what might happen. I mentioned this on the Patreon stream I did this morning. Be aware of the US imperialists' actions in what they regard as their own backyard. In my opinion, that may well be the most dangerous ground of all, because they can't do anything to defeat the Russians. They can't, not militarily, nor can they do much really to actually stand a chance of beating the Chinese. They can't do anything against them either. They can't have a war against Iran that they could hope to win. So what can they do? The answer is, in my view, and this will be the case no matter who is in charge, that we can expect more aggressive actions against Mexico, against Venezuela, of course, against Cuba, of course, against Haiti, against Nicaragua, and countless other Latin American countries, regardless of whether it's Trump or Harris. And again, like the fact that they keep talking in menacing terms about declaring the cartels to be terrorist organizations, which I suppose is true because they're very similar to Al Qaeda in that they are largely, but not exclusively, the creation of the United States imperialists themselves. But doing that would enable them to carry out military interventions against Mexico, which I wouldn't rule out them doing, given how bad things are going for them elsewhere. So these are things to be very aware of. It seems the Mexican government knows the game that is afoot, though, which at least gives them some kind of advantage. Okay, so we may wake up tomorrow to the RFK Jr. presidency. Imagine his voice first thing over the radio. My first act is to immediately declare that we are going to invade Iran. I will be first off the boat. Or something like that. So, I'm going to draw things to a close for this evening. And I am going to come on here tomorrow. And if I have to admit that my prediction was a giant pile of shite, I will do that. But it only remains for me to say thank you to our first admin, that's Jenny, for service tonight. Thank you to everybody who's tuned in. Thanks to everybody who supports the show on Patreon and Buy Me a Coffee. I'll be back again with you tomorrow to review the wasteland to come. But until then, I will leave you with some music.